You live a life that should be experienced, not a life that lives stagnant. And so you have an opportunity to say, I'm going to go forward with it, or I'm going to just sit here and wallow in the what ifs. And what ifs are not fun. I say go break your own rules, get out of that comfort zone and move forward.
Family, today we're joined by Dr. Pamela Gurley. Dr. Gurley has journeyed from Army veteran to one of the highest ranking federal government positions, and then went on to become a full-time entrepreneur, or as she says, business person, and is an international best-selling author. She shows us what's possible when purpose meets courage, and her work across multiple federal agencies, including the Department of Defense and State Department, has given her a front row seat, and it's truly helped her to impact how systems work as well as to view how they're planned for. And now she's here to talk with us about how we can change based on the change mechanics she's learned through her career and her own transparency. Enjoy Dr. Pamela Gurley. Take us back to a pivotal moment in November of 2020. Now, I understand that you're at the peak of your federal career and decide to step away to build something on your own at that time. What was that about, and what was it about that moment that spoke so deeply to you? Why was it saying now is the time?
Oh, that is such a really great question and very interesting one because not many people in the federal government reach the status of a GS-15 and then say, I'm stepping away. But I would say that I woke up convicted. It was like a gut punch, and it was a now or never. And it scared me. It literally scared me so much. I got up that morning and I called my mom and I told her about this revelation for me. And my mom said to me, she said, well, one of the things that I admired about you the most is that you've never been afraid to take risk. And so I gave my job 3 weeks notice, made sure that everything was up to par before I left, and just decided to leave. What I will say that came out of that is when you follow what comes to you that way and how strong it came, it was a conviction that allowed me to really, truly flourish. And I woke up days after that. And so I will say this too. Let me back up a little bit. That was a gift to myself. That was my 45th gift to myself, was freedom to walk out on my own and do everything. So the timing worked out in a way that, one, I was prepared for, but not prepared for. But I also know that God never gives you vision without giving you provision. So wherever I was at in that journey for me was going to happen for me. And in that, I woke up about maybe a week later, fully with a children's book series in my mind. Everything came where I knew what they were going to look like. I knew what the books were supposed to be like. And I'm grateful that I was given that, and I now have a children's book series that's in 3 languages, all because I chose to follow what was purposed for me.
When you talk about God not allowing you to have vision without you having provision, that's so important. And we grew up with that in our lives. We also grew up being told that faith without works is dead. So even with provision, a lot of people find it difficult to move forward. What else happened for you other than God's provision that allowed you to be here so successfully engaged in an incredible life that's enabling others in front of me in this moment?
I'm still standing. So my company, one of them, is about to be 8 years old in October. I'm really proud of that because there is an entrepreneur or a business owner. Sometimes I hate using the word entrepreneur because I am a full-blown business owner. And sometimes it's like it can be cliched to use the word entrepreneur. Because I feel like I work for the people that pay me as opposed to just being a sole entrepreneur. What I will say is that what no one tells you when you go into business for yourself is that they say, oh, it takes 5 years before you really see your return on investment. What I have learned in that pivot is that that only applies if you are working 100% for yourself, like you have it all. It's hard to divide time because my company was already 3 years old when I departed the government. And there were things that I had to learn to give myself grace over, going and working 100% for myself. And so I learned a great deal, one, about myself, and I learned about business in a way that I was not fully applying because I had a different steady income. And so it looks very different when you step out on purpose and step out on faith, and the pivoting, the constant pivot you have to learn when when you decide to make those decisions. I'm not saying don't make them. I'm not saying go ahead and make them. But there are things that you really cannot plan for. And that's one of the things that I learned. But I also learned that I'm an overcomer. I learned that I am resilient. And I learned that I had to learn to give myself balance. Because at first, working 18-hour days did not equate to always being productive. So I learned a lot about myself taking those leaps that most people are kind of fearful, but you're never prepared. But as long as you're open to learn, you will go far.
I love that so much. And at this point in my career, people come to me believing that I have so much to offer because I'm complete. I've completed a journey. Nothing
Mhm.
could be further from the truth. I'm in the front of my journey. And the reason I think that is that, as you just alluded to, I'm continuing to be a student in life. Every day I look to learn something new, and not just that, okay, I've lived another day, right? How am I
Yeah.
living another day? How am I giving another day? It's so exciting to hear you speaking that into your journey, even as you speak it about your journey. And your career spans some unique spaces. I mean, from military service to federal government, and then entrepreneurship, or you say business owner, and children's literature. Now, when we step back and think about it, how have these different perspectives shaped your approach to your leadership and service that you speak so lovingly of?
Oh, I've never given that thought, but it's such a it's a powerful question, because I think sometimes we like to be in certain places. We have this trajectory of life that we look for. And what I will say is a lot of things came to me and I said, well, I'm never going to say no, because things that came to me were meant for me. And it wasn't, and even though sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm not really qualified to do that, I've been open to learn it. So I never felt like I'm not qualified. What I am is resourceful enough to find my way to navigate spaces that make me uncomfortable. And I don't mind being uncomfortable. So I've been able to broaden my perspective on life. I've been able to broaden the things that I've been able to tap into my career. And if you want to be effective in leadership, you have to have a very broad view of the world around you, the people around you, and you also have to learn how to be a follower. You have to learn how to be a giver. So I think my philanthropy ties into being a great leader, because I'm always pouring into others, but I need others to pour into me. I've had I've chosen great mentors to look at, whether direct or indirect, and I've seen how they move. I've also seen how people move who I don't want to be like, and that's important. And for me, building where I'm at as a leader has always been based on what I value. And so every decision that I have made, whether it was something that was intentional that I wanted for myself or what God gave me to become, a lot of that has shaped where I'm at and how I react to the world, which is is more proactive than reactive. But everybody has a reaction to different things, and I'm just choosing a route that is very intentional. And that's what builds great leaders. And I think that's what's made me effective in becoming a consistent leader because I'm always learning.
And I would even dare guess that the discipline you gained from being in the military influenced your ability to carry through with the ideologies that you hold in a way maybe some people don't have that experience. What do you think they can take from their lives to allow them to embrace discipline? I'm not talking about that discipline of gritting through and it will happen. I'm talking about embracing discipline where you are joyful. You know, that Kobe Bryant embracing, where you're joyful when you're in hour 4 of your practice and you are no longer a Laker, you know.
Yes. I would take it back before the military. I am extremely grateful for the parents that I had. My dad was a drill sergeant, so going in the military, discipline didn't start there. Start there.
You had military discipline ideals before you had military discipline.
Yes, and so I'm thankful that my mom and my dad instilled um, consistently becoming, and consistently growing. Of course, my dad had his one track mind because he was a drill sergeant, because he did 23 years in the military, because he had that structure. I gained that structure. And then my mother was a different way academically, where, I watched her, grow and achieve and see what both academics and strong will get you. And so for me, choosing and navigating different things and trying different things started at home for me. Reading started at home for me. My mother, especially because my dad was deployed or gone a lot, to different overseas stations. He was stationed in Korea 4 times during my childhood. But my mother allowed us to be like whatever we wanted to be. And I was her child that was experimental. Oh, I wanted to try this. I wanted to try that. I wanted to try this. But she never said no. She allowed me and my sisters to find and navigate our own way by allowing us to participate in the things that at those times she thought was important for us because we asked for them. And so I attribute that to a lot of my discipline. My resiliency is also watching my parents overcome a lot of different things, from being in the military and escalating in your career. And then my mother, growing in her career at the same time of raising 3 girls and 3 successful girls. And so I feel like that's more of my journey, more so than what I could have ever learned, because it really does start at home, and discipline starts at home, and achieving different milestones and understanding how to celebrate those and take those risks and be fearful came from watching my mom, and then, disciplining from my dad. Granted, my mother was a disciplinarian too, though.
Kudos to your mom for that, and gratitude to you and your family for your service. Thank you so much for that, for your service in the military and progressing to the federal government. As a matter of fact,
Thank you.
in November of 2019, you released your first book, I Am Not A Stereotype, I Am H.E.R. Her, while still serving in the federal government. Talk to the family a little bit about finding your voice as an author while you were managing such a very demanding career, and talk a little bit about that career, what you actually did, so that we can understand the platform that you wrote this book from.
Okay, so whew, my first book, it took me years to write and put out, because that book had a lot of extremely personal experiences. And one of the things that after I put it out, it was like fear. I admit that I was like, oh, I can't believe I told this much about myself. There was a learning from that too, but it was completely opposite of everything that I've ever done in my career, becoming an author. I didn't even want to become an author. But as a speaker, I was sharing my story, and so many people would come up to me and say, do you have a book? Do you have a book? And I would blog, and I might write my personal feelings out there about different things, but nothing prepared me for having to sit down and write out things that happened to me, things that I had to admit to myself, things that I ignored about myself, even though I was just like doing very well career-wise and academically. I was excelling. But personally, I was toxic. I was broken. I really didn't know who I was, and I'm making decisions about my life in that
Mm-hmm.
space. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to admit that until I released it. And when I released it, one thing I learned is that nobody can't say anything about me that I've accepted on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And from that experience, I shared how my viewpoint of the world, things that I wish I would have known, things that I wish would change. But I had to admit to myself that I am stronger than any stereotype. And I had to come through that of not fitting in, but choosing that God didn't make me to fit in. And so embracing that part of me helped me understand why I needed to put that book out there. And then as far as my government position, I stayed in government budgeting for 14 and a half years. And even at that time, I believe I was a budget director, even still understanding that, going to school, writing a book, and managing government taxpayers' dollars, I was always intentional about my time management. So having to get off and write and cry and release, and we have some therapy behind this book, gave me a greater sense of purpose, because now I didn't just speak about it. And the cover of a book is nothing when you open it up. So you can judge and say things about me, not realizing my path. So all of the clean look doesn't mean that you're not clean on the inside or that you're not dirty on the inside, but I aired who I was to the world at that time. And it helped other people realize things about themselves. And so one of the things that I talk about is, we talk about having toxic friendships, but do we talk about us being that toxic
Mm-hmm.
friend? Because we're not ready to clean up our own lives. And I chose to clean up my own life to find a level of peace that I wish I would have had much earlier in life.
It's bold and it requires a lot of not just confidence, but faith for you to be able to be as transparent as that. And as you say, speak to the areas where you're the person bringing the toxicity to the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of why or how. Years ago, a client friend of mine shared with me something. He was having a particularly bad period in his life, and it was stemming from a lot of things he'd gone through as a child. As an adult, he decided to deal with it. And so he took therapy. As you reference,
Mm-hmm.
therapy is behind a lot of your ability to speak in your book so beautifully. One of the things he shared with me stuck with me. He said, "We're only ever as sick as our deepest secret." And then he told me, "That sounds so simple to you. I gotta tell you, it's one of the most difficult journeys you can take, is to journey back into what you've pushed down, what we sometimes we think overcoming is simply admitting it's there and then leaving it there and moving on. But knowing it's there requires you to, as you say, it can be dirty, rinse it clean, and deal with it. And the peace that you have in your face as I'm looking at you, and the joy you have in your voice, suggests that you ascribe to that idea of going in there and having a look. You have to be ready and strong, though, don't you?
No, you really don't. I think that if you don't sit in whatever you are feeling, you're never going to know what it feels like. And so I think that coming forward is sitting in your weakest times, because you can't understand your strength. Yeah, you can't understand your strength until you. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, yes, you have to be very strong in your commitment. But I think that it takes a level of authenticity to be that committed, because you have to own up to your own mess. And we have a very hard time of doing that for a lot of people. It takes a lot, because we carry a level of embarrassment. We're like, I don't want anybody to
Mm,
know. And it might not even be that serious. But trust me when I say, you're not the only one that's living in that space. So it's hard for me to say, oh, you shouldn't be embarrassed. I think it's okay to be embarrassed, but I think it's what's even better from it is that if you accept it and you address it, it can't embarrass you. So you have to be strong in your commitment for that purpose.
As you said earlier, nobody, and I paraquote you, nobody else can tell you something I've already told myself, told you myself.
Exactly.
Who was it who recently said, if you stop telling lies on me, I won't tell if you don't tell lies on me, I won't tell truths on you.
That was Kendrick Lamar in his rap diss to Drake.
Mhm. Yeah. So, but Doctor, your book speaks to something that many people are experiencing or have experienced and not dealt with, and that's that pressure to fit into boxes that other people build. I know you open up about being told you weren't black enough or being reduced to your appearance. Share with the family a little bit right now about how writing this truth helped you to move from feeling trapped to living authentically as you're speaking from now.
Yeah, in the very first thing that I wrote in my book was that, no matter what your parents teach you at home, it's the world that breaks you when you step out the house. And I learned that very early on. I never felt out of place in my house. I felt out of place once I walked into the world. My hair is naturally curly. I'm just wearing braids now because it's freezing outside. But my hair is curly. I had high cheekbones. I didn't look like my sisters. And it was always, what are you mixed with? What are you mixed with? And I think I shunned a part of that mixing piece because my family is like Indian, Mexican, and Black. My grandmother is Mexican. And I felt like I did not want to have to be in that space. Why couldn't I just be me? So because I did not watch a whole lot of black television shows, didn't watch a whole lot of black movies, it was, oh, you're not black enough. Or because of the things that I did like, or I just liked all genres of music, but because I can sing almost everything that came on the radio, it was, you're not black enough. But there's no such thing. Or you articulate your words very well. You don't speak like you're black. I didn't know black was a language, in terms of how we speak. And if that's how you feel, what do you actually suggest about black people? And I spent a lot of time hiding behind a lot of different feelings. And so, I appeased people. I kept relationships around that didn't need to be around. I really didn't know my place. It's not like I can go hang with the Mexican people or Hispanic people and fit in. It's not like I can go hang with the white people and fit in. And if I tried to fit in with people who I feel like look like me, they let me know I didn't fit in. That's very difficult when you are 5, 6, 7 years old and you're trying to navigate this space and you're in a very pivotal psychosocial and social emotional place in your growth and development. And so I had to talk about those things and how and why I made the decisions that I made. They were never really for me. I can't say that in my early adulthood, I never really made decisions for me. I made decisions that was making other people happy, and I overcompensated education wise and academic wise because I felt like I didn't want to have to deal with me. I can take whatever comes. I'm like, you know what, whatever. But on the outside, I looked extremely happy. I had a very blessed life. I was really great. At least that's what I painted it to be. And painting it caused me more havoc. It caused me toxic relationships, and I'm talking toxic, abusive relationships. And when I had my last divorce, I realized I've got to get to know me. And so writing that book was very therapeutic for me because I got to address how the world dealt with me and how I dealt with the world. And I also talk about what we need to do to reshape that. I have a chapter called The Pedestal Philosophy, which is how I really healed. because we tell our young ladies, and we, you should be on his pedestal. We share with men, you should put her on the pedestal. And to me, that's such a toxic breeding ground, because when you are up on someone's pedestal, or you put someone there, you're saying you that, oh, I can't measure up to that, but you better be perfect. And so as I'm sitting on this pedestal, I'm supposed to be perfect. And the moment that I'm not, all kinds of things happen. So sitting on my pedestal allows me to look down and say, no one's perfect, because I'm not perfect and I sit here. And so I never want to be on anyone's pedestal, because I don't want to be measured up to what's not realistic. And that's where my authenticity space really happened for me. And I had to share those things, because we have to change and shift narratives for ourselves in order to be the best versions of ourselves. And so that was liberating for me to put out in the book. So I didn't just talk about my toxicity. I talked about my healing, and I also talked about how the world can make those shifts so that they can heal and we can heal community wise.
This is so powerful. And as you were speaking in particular about you being on a pedestal, you took me back to thoughts of my relationship with one of my sisters, my eldest sister. I held on a pedestal. Sometimes I still do, I must confess. She's now in heaven, so she may be forgiving me even more. We had a conversation once because I had approached her about something, and, she said, wait a minute. You put me on that pedestal. I didn't climb on it. She said, and I want you to take me off of it. And I promise you're going to like me a lot better when we can see each other eye to eye. And it
Yes.
stayed with me. It stayed with me. And even as I've met people, not just in my personal life, but in my professional life, especially if I'm meeting people from a client perspective or an
Mhm.
organizational perspective of some sort, I meet them and I'm amazed by their resumes, their bios, their CVs, their media presence. And I have to remind myself of what my sister said. Yes, they are incredible people. Give them the grace of seeing them eye to eye, And we earn that. We walk into that room having earned that, and we continue to earn it. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing this about yourself, because it even brings me along further in my life from the lessons my sister taught me. Writing this book has meant you sharing some really deeply personal truths. What kind of responses from readers have surprised you the most? And have they really shaped your mission moving forward?
They absolutely have. And it's so funny, because the way that I wrote that book was also untraditional. So the first thing that they said was, I deliberately made that book flawed. I didn't really do many edits to it. And I went through an editor and I said, I don't want you to make significant changes to the flaws, because I needed people to know it's not about the book. We are all flawed individuals, but our message is so much deeper than our flaws. And that's what I wanted to take from the book. So that was one of the first things. And it was like, there was a few things, but I can't remember, because your book it touched me so much. Some of them started making plans of how to leave domestic violence relationships. Some of them just up and left domestic violence relationships, finally realizing certain things. There were one of them was an educator, and she said it really helped her 13-year-old daughter, and that I need to write an entire book on the pedestal philosophy. I was like, I was very grateful for the feedback that I got. And it gave me a greater sense of peace, because I was hiding who I was for a very long time, scared to step out into this world and just let people see me. And now I've really just, after that book came out, I was already healed when the book came out. So I was living in a very authentic space. And even more so, that I wasn't judged by what I wrote. I was celebrated. And that made a significant shift of me to remove any shame, any additional leftover shame that I was feeling, because you do feel it when your life is pushed out there to the world by me, of course. But I also realized nobody can really talk mess about the decisions I made in my life, because I chose to put that out. I chose to heal myself from it. I am not embarrassed by it. And it's helped me become such a dynamic, phenomenal woman that inspires and continues to inspire a mass amount of people. And when you live in that space, I also can admit I am not for everyone, and I'm okay with that too. So my gift of goodbye, it really got stronger because my self-worth and my self-value got stronger. And that's what I was able to give to other people from that book, based off of conversations that I've been able to have since that book has gone out.
This is powerful, and you make me think of something. Um, Another of my sisters said to me, because we were talking about a physical healing that she needed to go through, and I said, "Girl, you all healed up and you running out there?" She said, "Honey, I'm healed, but I'm still getting hit." And so I thought about that. And whether you're speaking physically or spiritually, however you're speaking of your healing, you're still getting hit. So it is a journey. I love that you refer to it as a journey. I'm healed and I'm still doing this. And your own
Mhm.
story about finding freedom through writing powered something. The Brown Girl and Brown Boy Literacy Foundation. Will you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes. And so even before I started writing children's books, and I think that's why it came to me, one of the things that came to my sleep when this series came about was that I spent a great bit of time speaking to adults. But in my book, the very first thing I share is that it's the world that broke me as a young child during that psychosocial and social emotional stage of development. Why am I not speaking to a different generation? Why am I speaking to adults who are in their place of healing, when I can go back and write psychosocial and social emotional books to help children learn how to be fed from the inside to the outside? But reading is fundamental. And so when I decided to go from writing the children's books to launching a literacy foundation, it was because I wanted kids to see something different. When I first wrote my books and I said, I'm going to do my first book signing, it's hard to just say to kids, come on, let's go to this book signing. But if you give them a festival and a good time,
Right?
they're going to want to come. And so that's what I did. I curated a Brown Boy and Brown Girl Kids Red Carpet Book Tour and Literacy Festival. And in that first year, I had a publicist, and she really helped me better understand what is needed. So, I mean, I had Getty Photography out there. I had, the things that I wanted for the activities. And it was just me, the only author. By year 2, I said, I need these children to see more than me. And so I started letting other authors come along. And of course, it was fee-based, because they're getting the piece of how I'm growing this and what I have to pay for venues and face painters. And I wanted it to be free. And so the Literacy Foundation is not to teach kids how to read. My thing is, literacy is life. You need to be literate in order to function. Communication, tech, math, science, to be a doctor, to buy a home. You have to understand that holistic literacy is more than reading and writing. It's understanding complexity. It's reading body language. It's a gamut of different things. And that's what I wanted to give to kids, is things that I didn't have for me in my presence when I was growing up. I did not have for me people that looked like me, that was super successful, just as authors, as doctors, as nurse practitioners. I didn't have that exposure. So my goal is to show them, during these tours, that art is literature. music is literature because we have kid karaoke that's out there. And so I almost in my mind, it's like an essence for kids because we don't have that for ourselves, for our Black and brown children. So, as I mission through this and I do my best to grow it, because again, this is not for me. This work that I am doing is God's work. I don't biologically have any children, which was odd that all of this would come to me. But I had to remind myself that, you know, he calls the qualified. And so he qualified me to do this because of my passion. I have 5 nieces, 5 nephews. I am an auntie to many, and he knew what he was giving me to nurture and take care of his vision for what this was supposed to be. And even though in my mind I'm like, how am I going to pay for all of this? Remember, I do the work, and he never gave me vision without that provision. So I'm always going to show up. I'm always going to do the work because that work is so much greater than me. And I'm hoping that my legacy long lives on with this tour, giving kids the tools that they need to be successful, adults.
Well, this is beautiful. And you, like so many of us, grew up not seeing book covers of characters who looked like you, but you are working to change that experience for the next generation. And I celebrate you for that. Doctor, what do you witness when children see themselves in stories for the first time?
Oh, I'm feeling teared up because I get so many different things where people have to let me know that their kids say, "Oh, the brown boy, he looks just like me," or "She just looks like me." I've had them dress up like my characters for Halloween. That let me know, wow, you must be doing something, because we don't always see things, and sometimes we can feel like, am I doing enough? Am I doing this right? And that lets me know I absolutely am. And so just knowing that these kids are not just seeing animals characters or robot characters or anything like that. They're seeing themselves. And I'm really grateful to see so many Black children's book authors, but they're not shining like they should. And so that's why I've curated the tour, is that I want to be seen. I want them to show up in the masses in one collective space. So when children walk in, they can say, I can do that too. I can write my own stories. But I think it's also important to cultivate stories for children that look like us, so that they can understand that we can do that too. So when I do my books, when I have one that's called Break Barriers, I'm showing them that you can be a therapist, you can be a carpenter, you can be a race car driver, you can be a swimmer. And they say Black people can't swim. So being an Olympic swimmer, kids should be able to see that. Kids should be able to see that they can be a Black race car driver, because you don't see that a lot. And what I did not know is that we think that because there's television and then there's videos and television, that every children has access to them. There are children that sometimes never see anything other than a white face in specific careers. Just like there are white people in this world that has never had interaction with a Black person until they leave off for college.
That's true. That's true. And when you're talking about the response you get from children when they see themselves for the first time, you carry me to a memory of my sister who did a book reading for some first graders in what was predominantly Black school. And she was reading Cinderella. She was told to read Cinderella for the little girls. And I had a set of children's books, and one of them was Cinderella. And she said, they told me to read Cinderella. Let me borrow Cinderella. I said, sure. She took the book in. Before getting there, dressed as Cinderella. And she showed up. And the little girls were like, and she had the crown and she just looked beautiful. And she began to read about Cinderella's life. Cinderella took care of the cinders along the fireplace and did basically the dirty work, the charring work, the charring work, the blackening work. And her family wasn't so kind to her that she was adopted into by death of her dad. And she told the story so beautifully from the book. She read the book, and then she'd stop and she'd ask them, "Do you know anybody like that?" Or me. And she said before she could get halfway through the book, kids from the other were coming in, and and it got crowded right in the room. I don't know where the fire marshals were, but it got crowded in the room, because everybody, whether they were a child in that first grade class or a janitor in the hallway or, someone walking along from administration, they all were coming in to see something they'd not seen in their lives. We think about children not seeing it. As you say, adults, we're healing at this point in our lives, or we're in our place for healing, whether we're doing it or not. And I thought about her living what you're talking about back then. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing your vision. You're taking this vision from you. I mean, think about it. You've gone from Jackson to Chicago, Houston to Atlanta. What are these communities teaching you about what children really need in order to fall in love with reading? And may I say, in the most healthy way, falling in love with themselves.
Mhm. So I do a lot of research for the looking at literacy rates in the different communities that I go into. And so that's how I make a lot of the choices. And then there are communities or community leaders or people in the community that'll say, "Oh, can you bring your tours to wherever?" And so that's how it ended up in Fayetteville. I had did some work with Dr. Norma, that's her name, and Dr. Anissa, and they was like, "Oh, can you bring this here?" So last year was the first year that I brought it, and then they're like, "Can you bring it back?" So it's coming back. It's going back to Fayetteville again this year. The same thing for Jackson. I had a sponsor that said, "Can you bring your tour to Jackson, Mississippi? Because they really do need it." And of course, I do look at the literacy rates, but first and foremost, if people in the community say, "Can you bring it?" and they'll help me out with, because that's not my city, I'm going to bring my tour there. And so I have been very lucky to Jackson. This will be the fourth year in Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, I know, fourth year in Jackson, Mississippi. And we're in our fifth year. And so then it will also be, or is it the third year in Jackson? I think it's the third or fourth year in Jackson. This is the second year in Fayetteville. It will be a first time in Savannah. And again, I'm looking at literacy rates in the marginalized communities, and then it will be in Huntsville. The nonprofit is out of Huntsville, Alabama, and I do a lot of work with the Boys and Girls Club of Huntsville, and every room that I walk in predominantly looks like me. And one thing I do love about the kids is after they're like hugging and, "Can I get a picture?" And it fills me just knowing that I'm contributing to their mental and emotional and physical development, because when they get to see someone that looks like them, it allows them to want to achieve more, realizing that they can be, versus not seeing someone successful at all and wondering what they can become.
That's wonderful. And we think about knowing our mission, and part of knowing our mission is knowing the moment. So it's highly understandable if your moment is about educating and elevating the minds of young brown people, young people of color. Our family is multinational, multiracial. We are a beautiful complex of people, and inside of complex is complexity. Is what you're doing just for brown kids? Can other kids learn from what you're doing, and can other communities have a participation from you in what you're doing if they want?
Yes, and you know what? That is a super great question. We are greater together. That is one thing that I will say. Do am I is my goal preferred to have a greater impact? The marginalized community is a very mixed
Mm-hmm.
community. The other thing I want children to understand is that we are a cultural melting pot. You, if no matter what your culture is, live in it and accept it. If you are multicultural, you don't have to choose, because I have biracial nieces, you don't have to choose whether to be black or white. You can choose to just be. You don't have to explain who you are, just be who you are, show up as who you are. And that's for anyone, and I want all kids to understand that. And I've been in places where kids are extremely cruel because they're seeing that somewhere. So the goal is to make that shift and change. My books, granted, there's the Brown Girl and Brown Boy series, but I have every nationality. I have young girls wearing hijabs in my book. I want them to see that every child, then when you walk into a classroom, you're going to see every nationality. You're going to see different cultures. So my tours are not just for blacks or whites. It's for the marginalized communities, though I do target what I know. I'm never been white, although I found out through a DNA test I'm like 11% British Irish, but that's not something that I can embrace. I didn't grow up that way. I'm trying to give, children something that I did not have. And so the other thing that I learned, the community that I saw in Jackson that helped me really shape this as well, that I did not consider in the demographic when I was building this tour, was that there are a lot of white couples, families that adopt black children. And they don't know how to properly give them the cultural context of understanding who they are. That was so vital for me to learn. I was like, never thought of considering them in this group. So it widened the net for me to understand that the work that I am doing is going to shape every child. One, because white children have to learn how that they are different from black children, but that's okay. And so coming out to my tours, it's made for white children, black children. We are not going to turn anyone away, but we do think it's important that holistically we show up as a community. But it's also important for black children to be able to see and have knowledge and gain knowledge of people that look like them. You can walk out into this world and see any white person in any profession pretty much excelling, but we don't have that level of exposure at all levels, especially when you live in marginalized communities. So it's important that they see that.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. And as we look ahead, I'm thinking about you and what's next for you. I can't imagine what you imagine for yourself, but please just share with us what you can that's really exciting you about the future of literacy and representation.
My goal is one of the things that I believe in. My goal is that we are able to have just as many opportunities in terms of books and where they're at and how they are placed, more accessible and available, because they're not the same thing. I talk about that all the time. Having availability does not make them accessible. And when they're accessible, they're not always available, depending on the means and the location and all of those things. So to me, I'm seeing literacy in a place where equity is really there. Diversity is really there. And they don't have to, there's not going to be a struggle to have it both available and accessible. And as long as that does not exist, my tour will definitely exist to try to fit that need. And as far as like the other future, I'm going to tell you, at some point I'll get to do what I want to do. That's just not happening yet. I say, here's what I'm going to do. And God says, nope, here's what you're going to do. So now I've just kind of learned to plan and speak life into things that are going to be good for me personally and what I can pour into without looking too far down the line, because my life is shaped in very purposeful moments and things that I don't see coming. And I feel like those are things that I'm going to answer to first. So while I do have goals, I just see a lot of those goals go away and be filled with things that are supposed to be there.
Well, you know, you've made it clear that you're transparent and living in a way that you take yourself off that pedestal. Let me ask you, with the discipline, the excitement of your life, what daily rituals are keeping you grounded?
So I do. I have, and anyone who interacts with me and that's in my phone and whatnot. With the very first thing, I get up in the morning and I'm in a place of prayer. I am praying and I'm meditating, and that's what I do for at least a good half hour. And then I go online and I'm looking for context of things that fill me. I'm like, because I do a daily text Monday through Friday to at least maybe 20, 25 people in my phone, if not more. And I'm sending like a good morning message. Normally it's a graphic that either has spiritual stuff on there or enlightening stuff on there. But I'm sending that out, and that's how I start my day, because I want people to know this. I prayed for you. I want you to go off and have a good day, because sometimes we don't always get up in the right place and in the right mindset. So I'm waking up and choosing to give, thanks. I want to start my day just saying, whatever's supposed to map out for this day, let this map out in its favor. If there is something that I know that I'm going to not feel good about, help me to have the discernment to find something in that good in that day or learning from it. And then I just get on my phone and I'm like, let me send all my little morning messages to people. And I have been doing that for the betterment of at least over 20 years. And so I look back, I'm like, gosh, I've been doing that for a very long time. But my relationships are just that long. And for me, I had to learn how to become not a good friend, but a great friend, a very low maintenance friend at that. I like low maintenance friendships because I'm a busy person, but I'm very intentional. And I have been very intentional for 20 plus years, ensuring that the people are close to me. Even if we don't talk on the phone daily, you're going to hear from me daily.
Dr. Pamela, that's beautiful. And those daily messages, while sent to, I assume, intimate relationships, friends, 25, if you recaptured those, you've got a book there that could be a year for all of us who want to benefit from those same messages, delete the personal and keep us grounded on the whole. I'd love us to end our questioning on something meaningful to our listening family that is so exciting for me about you. And I mean, we've already talked about you being an Army veteran, a federal executive, and now a literacy champion. Your journey really is showing us the power of reinvention as well as vision. What message will you share with someone who's standing at their own crossroads right now, wondering if it's time for them to reinvent and they don't quite yet have the vision?
Ooh, that's heavy. I like it. Um, I think what I will say is sometimes you never know the direction you are supposed to go until you go into some direction. You a lot of times we know what we want to do. We're just scared to make those steps. Reinvention is at any age, and choosing what you want to do has less to do with whether you can do it or not. It has more to do with when you're ready to do it and that you just need to do it. Do it. And even if you fail, just say, well, you know what? I'm either going to try harder because now it becomes a purpose driven thing for me. Or you can say, well, heck, I tried it and I didn't like it. So I failed at it because I didn't like it so much that it wasn't something I'm passionate about. But fear prevents a lot of us from living. And you can't always worry about the means of how you're going to get there, because if it's a passion and it's wearing you on the inside, if it's wearing you on the inside, it's going to make you more sick than more healthy. And so I would say that live less off fear and more in an authentic space to just leap out there and try it. There's a lot of people who say that they are too old or it's just too late, and there is no such thing. Reinvention, and it looks a lot like a very deep level of pivoting when there's something in your life, and find joy in it. I think that's what it is. You live a life that should be experienced, not a life that lives stagnant. And so you have an opportunity to say, I'm going to go forward with it, or I'm going to just sit here and wallow in the what ifs. And what ifs are not fun. I say go break your own rules, get out of that comfort zone and move forward.
Oh my goodness, I love that so much. You know, I'm on a I'm on a theme laced life right now about joy, and you know, joy
Oh,
is one of the fruits of the spirit. It's a responsibility for believers to express joy forward, right? Um,
yes.
let's go 4 for 4 and have a little give you a little joy, okay? So you get to invite 4 people to dinner from any time past to present. Now, Dr. Pamela, don't put AI people in, okay?
I'm,
Uh, okay? Humans, not humanoids.
okay.
Who's at your dinner table and why?
Okay. So, Madam CJ Walker is first and foremost most because she not only was a very she became and created herself to be a very successful entrepreneurship. And when we look at the industry of beauty, I think I would love to get her perspective on where we are now, having gone natural and all of those things. I wonder what she would have to say. So I would love to like come and have my table and look at the world we are living in, and now I would like to hear how what her pivot would look like in this space today. So that's one of them. I feel like Mary McLeod Bethune, because she was such a very pioneer and a very pivotal voice for the civil rights movement. I would love to get her perspective of today to learn how to better navigate the waters that we are in right now. And it's very scary, but you get people like her who was fearless in her pursuit for equity and justice for, I would just love to pick her brain. The other one would be Claudette Colvin, because people talk about Rosa Parks, but they don't talk about her. And at 15, she was the one that did not want to give up her seat on the bus. So to me, we look at this times, I would love to know what her 15-year-old self told her in that moment, or what she was feeling, that would help not only the 15-year-olds of our generation how to be stronger in our own power. I would love to know how to hone in on that level of empowerment. And then the last person I think is very personal to me. I probably would choose either my great great grandmother, who I, never really got to know, but she always talked very heavily about working in the fields and being in the slavery era. And then the other one would be a tie between her and my grandmother, who is Mexican, because I never really got to know the historical um, per purview, I guess, of her life growing up from her grandmother, and what I've got from her and the tributes things that I've gotten from her, because I did not grow up with my biological dad. So those would be the two who have significant ties to who I am, that I would love to sit and know the historical value of that made me.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine what you'd be serving at that dinner, but I know a lot of advice and a lot of experience would be served.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Let's go 2 for 4.
Okay.
What music are you listening to right now that you can share with us and why? 4.
So okay, so Kendrick Lamar is
You're
definitely on that
transparent.
list.
You're transparent. Tell the truth. Don't clean that
I
playlist
am
up.
Kendrick Lamar. And my friends who go back and watch this, they're gonna be like, oh yeah. So Glorilla
Uh,
right now. It's like that's even my karaoke. Lotto is on there,
okay.
and and I'm just my last one would be I just have a old school mix of 80s, like 80s and 90s hip hop, because this is some of this hip hop now, so it's not just one in particular. It's the Kool Moe Dees, the Queen Latifahs. It's just the playlist that I love to listen to.
Oh, you old school with the okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. What four books do you advise for our family to read and why?
Okay, so for my guilty pleasure, right now it's any book I would recommend by Kennedy Ryan, because she has a new book, Can't Get Enough, but her other books, Before I Let Go and Real and This Could Be Us, those it made me like someone who's a fan that loves her work. So that's my guilty pleasure. The other ones would be I've not read yet, but these are on my Black History book list that I just got. Would be The Season of Light by Julie. It's I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I want to say it's Iro Mananja, or it's IORMAUAN. I think that's a JA. So it's I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's called Season of Light. The other one is The Tiny Things. The Tiny Things Get Heavier by Esther Okonkwo, Okonkwo. That's another one. And then one of them that I actually have read that was very made me look at things a little bit differently is The Purposeful Growth Solution by Mark A. Mears. I had interviewed him on my podcast before, me and some my other co-hosts, and the things that he had said was so empowering. And then he sent us the book, and so that was definitely on my list when I look at being in purpose and being intentional. So those are my four books.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Doctor, why did you recommend books that you haven't read? And I asked that toward the point of you're so intentional.
So I did that because, when other people recommend books to me, I'm a huge reader when it comes to Black History Month. And so those were books that I saw and I was reading all about them. And I'm like, they have to resonate personally with me about the intent. But I also like my guilty pleasure books, because those are needed to lessen some of the things that other books have. So when you're reading books about situations that you can relate to, that they don't always feel good, or sometimes it's just so in your face that I can navigate backwards. But I feel like I'm giving people books that, even though I have not read them, I think that they are important reads, because sometimes we need to connect with things that are not always known about ourselves, about our communities, and just look a little bit differently. So I often share on my pages different books that I have read. Like if I had to pick one that I've read that changed my life, would be Condoleezza Rice's book.
Mm-hmm.
I saw her in a different light, but it gave me a better understanding of a viewpoint of the Republican Party and understanding why she thought the way she was. And to me, is the true definition of a leader.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we can, of course, do the becoming and all of that, but those are so cliche to me. And so I wanted to give a different level of empowerment.
I'm so grateful to you for bringing your truth and your transparency to this conversation. And we're going to round that out with going four for four. What four pieces of advice do you have for our family that you think is really important today? And if it's advice that was shared to you by someone else, please pay homage to the author of that advice by telling us who it was.
Okay. So personally, I can probably give little nuggets all day. One of my things on my social media is like, I live life literacy, and I drop gems. And so here are my four gem drops for the family. One, live with intent. And I'm talking heavy, authentic intent. It makes you feel better. You make people, the energy that you want is going to come to you. So when you live an intentional life, you just show up differently. You feel differently. You walk differently. You know you belong in spaces that you don't even realize is a space because you just stand up and you just have that intention about you. The other thing that I will say is take risk. One of the things I would say, take risk and kick ass, even if it's your own. So, because sometimes we need to kick ourselves in order to move forward. And honestly, if we don't get behind us and kick ourselves sometimes, we never move forward because, as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So people can give you all the tools in the world. But if you don't utilize them or make use of them or even look at them, you just never know. So sometimes you have to, take those risks and kick your own ass. So the other thing, the third one would be show up. And I don't just mean via text. I don't mean, disconnect and show up. I think that we are so tied to our phones that I think we forget about how important showing up in real time looks. And I am a living witness to this right now, that I'm disconnecting from just having conversations via text or via the phone. This is my last year in my 40s, and instead of looking at work to achieve as a milestone, I'm making memories as my milestones. So I am showing up to different cities and I'm getting to see people who I have only met and talked to for years on social media. I'm showing up in person for these people. As long as, they want time with me, I'm giving them time. And so you have to show up and disconnect and be present. So that's my third one. And the last one is don't take anything for granted. Life is so short, and it's a lot shorter than what you think. And I don't just mean by death. I'm talking, there's a season for everything. So appreciate exactly what you have and don't worry about what you don't, but live in the moment. You just gotta realize that, things are not always going to be the same. So those would be my 4 gems.
Well, you have truly dropped them well, and I know our family is enjoying them and likely re-listening to them. And candidly speaking, so am I. I am so grateful to have had you join this SJBH family. I pray you'll come back and consider it home. The next time it'll be a reunion. In the meantime, from my heart to your home, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. It has been a tremendous pleasure, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my voice and my thoughts and my life on, with you and the family. And now your family's my family, and we're family.
Welcome home. Welcome home.